Mock draft season is back, and I'm so excited for the 2024 NBA draft cycle. Now listen, I did record a way too early 2024 NBA mock draft, and then I've been a little radio silent in terms of mock drafts. That is my typical procedure because the last 4 months or so, all I've done is grind film. I've watched so much of these college players, some of these international guys. I've spent so much time watching the players we're going to talk about in this video. And that's why I'm coming at you with a full first round mock before the NBA season has even started. It's a special video here on the channel for the beginning of the NBA season. I'm so excited. I know you are as well. If you are, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. A lot of great draft content will be coming out on the channel this week, this month, and this year. So there's a lot of stuff to stay in tune for. And let's jump into it now with the first overall pick. And I gave it to the Washington Wizards. And I think they're a team that is likely going to be in a spot where they have earned this selection. Now, the Wizards, they've made a lot of really great moves. I think Michael Winger was a fantastic hire. I think that the Wizards are headed in the right direction. So Wizards fans, you have to rejoice. And I think seeing yourself first overall here is a great thing. Now, first overall, who could they take? And listen, this is kind of an introductory video to a lot of these draft prospects and who they are. What we're going to go with here, first overall for the Washington Wizards, Ron Holland, G League Ignite. He's an explosive wing player with real downhill scoring capability. He's a very good ball handler, shot maker, shot creator, and I think he's got a very interesting shot diet that will fit in well long-term with the Washington Wizards, who just did extend Deni Avdija. Of course, they do have Jordan Poole, who they traded for this offseason. Shot creation, shot making might not be the biggest flaw for Washington, but really, if you're picking first overall, you're in a spot here to draft talent and upside, and Ron Holland has a ton of that with his athletic profile, his ability to score the basketball. And G League Ignite, listen, this is not going to be the only time you see them in the lottery, let alone in the top 5. They have a lot of talent. This year, I think the G League Ignite program is the richest it maybe will ever be in terms of the actual talent pool and the type of players we see coming out this year in terms of where they're selected on draft night. Ron Holland, of course, before the year, really, we're kind of at the very beginning stages of this draft process. He's got all the makings of a potential first overall pick, and I'm very excited for Wizards fans that they're going to have the opportunity to select them. And when it comes to the actual ordering here, it's kind of a loose ordering based on what I expect. We're going to talk about some pick swaps and all that kind of stuff in this video as well. So just bear with me on the order. The order is not the most important thing here. We're more so talking fit, need, and how these players and prospects will likely develop and what they'll turn into in the future, which gets me really excited for pick number 2 with the Portland Trailblazers, specifically with who I have them selecting here. Scoot Henderson was a great selection for them, 3rd overall. I love that selection. I had him graded as my 2nd best player in the last year's draft. I also think getting Chris Murray was very, very good. But one thing that this team is lacking, I think a little bit of playmaking, specifically out of the forward spots. Now, Matisse Thybulle, good player. Jeremy Grant, good player. They have 2 good wings, forwards, whatever you want to call them. But this guy, I think, is going to be quite a bit different, and that is Matas Buzelis from G League Ignite as well. So back-to-back picks to start off this mock draft, G League Ignite products, and I'm really excited about Matas Buzelis, who I think there's a real chance he is the first overall pick. And there's a couple of different ways you can look at him. Some people have viewed him as a 6'9", 6'10" point guard. I don't really look at him that way, and it actually excites me more that he isn't that. I look at him as this really rangy, smart, quick, good field, decisive wing. And, you know, that maybe is less exciting. Obviously, the idea of a 6'10" point guard is so much fun. Really, that's not what you need. Your point guard doesn't have to be giant. Now, it helps if he is. It helps having one of the most talented players in the league, like a Luka Doncic, for example, be 6'7". That's an awesome trait and skill. Matas Buzelis, he's going to be a really good player. I don't think he's a Luka Doncic level player, and that's okay. There's only X amount of players in the league that are like that. Matas Buzelis has, again, really good feel. I think he's got dynamic ball handling capabilities with his size. And I think his off-ball capabilities make him actually a really good wing player instead of an on-ball guard. And because of that, there's going to be times where you can run your offense through him. He has some on-ball capabilities, on-ball skills, and the Blazers will look to use that at times. But part of what makes him such an awesome selection here, 2nd overall for Portland, is I know without a doubt, no question in my mind, he could fit next to Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and the other core pieces for Portland this upcoming season and beyond, because Matas Buzelis just has that skill set. We're seeing it already for G League Ignite with him playing a variety of different roles, and I think going into the NBA, it's going to be perfect for him if he can be placed in kind of a Franz Wagner type role, and I think he's actually going to end up being Franz Wagner plus. I think he's going to be a little bit better than Franz Wagner, and I don't say that as a knock on Wagner. I say that as praise for Buzelis, who I think is just really, really, really a good prospect. Listen, the narrative around this draft is everyone's going to say it's a weak draft. It's a weak draft. Do not believe that, okay? Everyone tells you that. They said that for the 2020 NBA draft. They said, oh, this is the draft. You don't want to have the first overall pick. I would love to have Anthony Edwards on my team right about now. Drafts always have good players. They always have strong players. You just have to identify who they are. This draft has a lot of them as well. Don't listen to the noise. It's not as good as 2023. 2023 was probably the best draft I'll ever have the opportunity to evaluate, just with how good it was top to bottom with superstar talent at the very top. But listen, this draft is still very strong, and there's going to be good players coming out of it, which really excites me about pick number 3, where I have the Chicago Bulls right now. I know people are going to say, whoa, the Bulls at pick 3. Listen, I think there's a real chance this team blows it up a bit this year. DeMar DeRozan specifically is the name to watch. Zach LaVine as well. They did recently extend Nikola Vucevic. This guy that I'm going to have them draft 3rd overall could fit around Vooch, but at the end of the day, this is kind of the beginning of a rebuild for the Bulls if they have a top 3 pick in this year's draft. And I really like this kid. He's got all the intangibles, all the physicals, pretty much everything you're looking for from a forward prospect who can also play some center, and that's Alex Sarr from the Perth Wildcats in the NBL. This kid's really special, especially defensively. He's got a lot of length, size, and I think he is just a very intriguing prospect with his ability to guard across multiple positions. You know, scouting him, there's moments where he's on ball defending one of the best ball handlers in the NBL, or some clips against NBA teams, because the Perth Wildcats did face the G League Ignite this year as well. And Sarr not only survives in space, he actually thrives in space defensively with his ability to flip his hips, change direction, stay in front of ball handlers, and then ultimately erase shots at the rim as well with his elite length, shot block timing. He's just a really complete defensive prospect. And then on the offensive end, there's a lot of things he does very well as well. I think he's a good off-ball offensive player, specifically as a dunker spot sitter. Now, that's not one of the most exciting traits for a prospect, but I think it's a super important one. Do you know where to position yourself around the baseline when someone else has the ball? More than often, a guy like Alex Sarr coming into the league, he's not going to have the ball put in his hands, even if he is a top 3 pick. Sometimes he'll have that opportunity, but not always. And I think for him, playing off the ball is going to be very important. But he also has some of those really dynamic flashes, whether that's off of a stride stop, kind of attacking a defender downhill, hitting a nasty fadeaway jump shot. There's been moments this year where Sarr does kind of showcase some of those things as well. So I'm very excited about him as a prospect. Looking forward to seeing where his career takes him. And I think the Bulls would do very, very well here if they selected him 3rd overall as a player who I think could become the beginning of a rebuild for the Bulls. Pick number 4, we have the Detroit Pistons here. And listen, we've talked a lot about G League Ignite basketball. I'm excited for the Pistons. You know, they took Cade Cunningham 1st overall a couple of years ago, went with Jaden Ivey 2 drafts ago, and then this past draft, they took kind of a big question mark in Ausar Thompson out of Overtime Elite in round 1. They also came back and drafted Marcus Sasser later in the 1st round. I've loved what the Pistons have done. They've done a very good job identifying talent in the draft, selecting talent, and now they have a surplus of talent, specifically young talent. I think that's a real testament to Troy Weaver, the job he's done. He inherited a huge mess there in Detroit, and I think he's done a really great job turning that around. Now, it hasn't translated to a lot of wins. I do have them at pick 4 currently in this mock, so I'm a little skeptical on how many games they're going to win this year. We'll see what Monty Williams does. I think there's a real chance this team booms in a way people aren't expecting, but I have to see it first to really believe it. 4th overall, though, I have them going with another really great defensive prospect in Izan Almansa from G League Ignite. And this kid excites me a ton for a few different reasons. Not only is he Spanish, which is always fun. It's fun having kind of these international prospect guys to evaluate, break down, and just really intriguing, exciting players. But he's just so much fun in terms of his offensive capabilities. He's hitting crazy gather, Euro step, floaters from the hash. He's doing just ridiculous things on the floor. He has a lot of feel, really good playmaking, decision capabilities for his size, and I think he's got a very advanced post set compared to a lot of other draft prospects, typically in the top 10 as well. Most of the draft prospects you see with a really good post set are 3-year, 4-year college players, while Almansa is very young relative to those guys. So you're looking at a guy who I still think there's so much to tap into, but his footwork, his potential, his upside, I think is very immense. Defensively, I think he knows how to position his body very well. I don't think he's quite as strong of a defensive prospect as Alex Sarr was, who we talked about at pick number 3. But at number 4 here, Almansa is a really nice fit in Detroit. I think he could be that true power forward next to Jalen Duren. I think that's one of the big question marks I have for Detroit is who's the long-term power forward for this team, while Almansa solves that pretty much immediately, and I think he's a great fit for Detroit going into their future. Number 5, really excited about this pick as well as we talk about the San Antonio Spurs, who they're just going to be so much fun to watch this year. I'm so excited for Spurs basketball. Victor Wembanyama, I talked about him all last draft cycle. I feel like every video people were saying, stop praising Victor Wembanyama so much. Stop talking about how good he is for 2-3 minutes to start every video, because he was always picked number 1 in all of my mocks, obviously. Well, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I didn't ever waste, a single second not talking about him, because he is just that good of a prospect. I'm so lucky to have evaluated him. Now the Spurs have the question of who do they put around him, and I think at 5 here it's a really exciting choice in Isaiah Collier from USC. This kid is a really good talent, plays with pace, wins with his ability to handle the basketball, get to advantageous spots on the court. He's a good passer. He's not someone who's just defined by passing, because he's also a capable scorer. And I think having a guard there in San Antonio that is able to score and facilitate simultaneously is a big difference from what they have currently with Tre Jones, who I do like. I think Tre Jones is developing into a very good point guard in the NBA, someone who is a top 40-ish point guard. But if you have that and Isaiah Collier, your backcourt play is just incredible. I'm a huge Devin Vassell guy. Keldon Johnson's really talented. Jeremy Sohan is really good as well. I'm a little bit lower on Blake Wesley. I think Malachi Branham, there's something there with him. Of course, this team just extended Zach Collins as well. The Spurs, they have a good team. Actually, their young talent is there. It's just about putting it all together, winning basketball games, and ultimately with Victor Wembanyama, I'm comfortable that within 2-3 years, we're going to talk about this team as a serious contender in the Western Conference. And I think selecting a guy like Isaiah Collier really does shift the tide in that direction even more so than it's already headed. Pick number 6, and this is one of those first picks that we have to talk about where this is trade implications. This pick is for the Oklahoma City Thunder at number 6 overall, and it's via the Houston Rockets from the Russell Westbrook-Chris Paul swap. I know that feels like so long ago, and the Thunder here, with a really good, talented young team, are now in a spot where they could potentially capitalize on some high-end draft capital. Now look, the Rockets could be a better team this year. It's tough for me to project right now. I put them at 6. Don't feel great about it. Listen, this year is going to be a bloodbath in the Western Conference. Who knows who finishes where? Injuries are going to completely reshape the conference. But for this purpose, in this video, I have the Thunder taking Justin Edwards 6th overall out of Kentucky. Really smooth left-handed stroke, and I think Oklahoma City, not that they need another wing, because Jalen Williams was such a good selection for them, and I'm talking about wing Jalen Williams, of course. They have Josh Giddey. They have all of this perimeter talent. It almost feels redundant, right? Like, why do we need another talented wing player? Well, who in the league is turning down more talented wing players? The more you can have when it comes to skilled size on the perimeter, the better. And Justin Edwards fits into that. Just a really great player. Somebody who has a smooth stroke on all 3 levels. He's able to score from the 3-point line, does so on step backs on occasion, also likes to step into some mid-range jump shots, does that a little bit less often, but still capable of it. And then he's very good at getting to the rim. And he's not just an above the rim finisher, which is what you typically see with good athletes at the high school and college level, but he's also a finesse finisher, someone who can rely on concentration, finishing around big men, contorting his body, and finishing through traffic. That's very impressive for me, something I think is super important in analyzing young prospects like Edwards, and I think because of that, the Thunder are really sitting well with this selection. They also have 2 more firsts in this year's draft, so I'm just so excited for where this team's future is going. I think the Thunder are going to be really great this year, and Justin Edwards just propels them even further. Pick number 7, we have the Charlotte Hornets, who were a massive topic of discussion last draft cycle as they moved up to pick number 2, ultimately landed on Brandon Miller out of Alabama. I like Brandon Miller as a prospect. I was surprised they took him 2nd overall, if I'm being completely honest with you. But here I think they have an opportunity to add to their backcourt, something that I thought became very apparent they still needed more of during Summer League when people were complaining, well, they couldn't get Brandon Miller the ball, the guard play wasn't very good. It's almost like all draft cycle long, I said, look, they could use another guard. They could use another guard because people were questioning if Scoot Henderson or Amin Thompson could fit there. I said, look, they definitely could. And this year they'll have a chance to actually address the guard spot. They'll go with DJ Wagner out of Kentucky. A really talented individual, was co-MVP of the McDonald's All-American game. And just honestly a flat-out scorer of the basketball who I think is growing as a facilitator, decision maker. I do think he is quite a bit better of a prospect than what we saw from Nick Smith Jr. a year ago at Arkansas. I think DJ Wagner is going to be a bit more reliable, especially scoring the basketball. Nick Smith Jr. had his ups and downs in terms of efficiency. I still think Nick Smith Jr. could find a role in the NBA, probably as a bench spark plug, but DJ Wagner has real starter upside, somebody who could grow into a nice player. I think, with LaMelo Ball, when you have plus size at the position already, you don't have to worry about, how big is our other guard, because you have a plus size guard already. Gives you flexibility in your drafting of, hey, if we think DJ Wagner is just a good player, we can afford to take him here, which is what I think the Hornets should do in this position and what I would see them possibly doing. Pick number 8, when we talk about really good trades, the San Antonio Spurs definitely fill that here. This pick comes from the Toronto Raptors in the trade for Jakob Poeltl. This is a top 6 protected pick, so 8th overall is about as good as it gets for San Antonio in terms of the return for Poeltl. And while they traded one center, they're going to draft a new one here to complement Victor Wembanyama, and boy, is this team going to be lengthy and long. They're going with Aday Mara from UCLA, another Spanish-born prospect. And this guy is a massive, massive human being, 7'3", but the real selling point for him is he might be one of the most talented players in this year's draft when it comes to his ability to make decisions as a facilitator. His post arsenal is unmatched, and you pair that with his size in this draft, it's pretty reminiscent of Zach Edey, who you will not see in this first round mock, but he's 4 years younger, quite a bit more mobile, and I think that his decision-making as a passer is significantly better. So those are all skills that you're saying, wow, that would look pretty good in San Antonio, who has an opportunity to build probably the biggest front court in NBA history with Aday Mara, and in there as well you have then Victor Wembanyama. So just a lot of length, size, shot blocking. You have Zach Collins to kind of be the starting center. Aday Mara, you give him time to develop into what he hopefully becomes, which if you have to give a comp for it, he's like a bigger, less athletic Alperen Şengün, which, not that that's the perfect comp, don't hold me to that, but it's just the type of player we're talking about, the rough archetype. And I think that there's some things in there that could really bode well for San Antonio, having those two guys in their front court in Wembanyama and Mara at the same time. Pick number 9, we move on to the Utah Jazz, and this one is exciting for me as well for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think the Jazz have a ton of talent already on roster, especially young talent. You look at Lauri Markkanen, obviously had a huge breakout season last year, but I think they nailed the draft this past year. Keontae George was a really great high upside pick. I think he'll live up to that quite a bit. Then you look at Taylor Hendricks, who I was so high on Taylor Hendricks. I think the Jazz just knocked it out of the park with him. Trading for John Collins was smart. They also drafted Bryce Sensabaugh. You could almost argue, hey, there's no room for another top 10 pick here. Well, they have one, and they're going to go ahead and take Tyrese Proctor from Duke, who I think is destined for a big sophomore season. Toward the end of his freshman season, there were flashes that I continued to see on film of his passing, facilitating, decision-making that I thought, yeah, this guy's pretty darn good. I would be surprised if he doesn't have a high-impact role at some point in the NBA as a lead ball handler. And if you're looking at one thing Utah needs a little bit, it's probably a lead ball handler, lead decision maker, a lead guard. And I think that's what Tyrese Proctor is going to be. I think this is going to be, again, a huge season for him at Duke in year 2, where you look at all of his synergy numbers, everything is trending in the right direction. I think his shot diet is pretty much what you're looking for out of a pick and roll point guard. And I think the Jazz at 9 sit in a pretty spot to honestly just take advantage of this situation that they're in with all the draft picks that they're going to have coming over the next few years. Draft a good player here in Proctor from Duke, who, hey, we've seen Danny Ainge succeed drafting from Duke before. Cough, cough, Jason Tatum. Not that Proctor won't be Tatum, don't get me wrong. But I think Proctor's going to be pretty darn good, and I like this fit a lot, specifically as a pairing with a guy like Walker Kessler. Number 10, the Orlando Magic. And when you look at this team, it's hard to find a specific need for them. on the roster. They have a lot of talent up and down. I think they killed it in this most recent draft with Anthony Black. I think his kind of connecting skills, his size, rebounding for the position, athleticism, defensive intangibles, they're going to be hard to replicate, and teams are going to struggle facing that on a night-to-night basis. Jett Howard was a nice addition. I wanted to give this team shooting. I really did, but it just doesn't seem like that's what Orlando's going to draft. They haven't valued shooting in the last few drafts. It's hard for me to sell someone on that right now, just with how I feel about the team. So instead, we're looking at the center spot, and we're going to get a guy who's a fantastic screener and was really productive in a low volume of minutes last year. Oh, and by the way, he was part of a national title team. I'm talking about Donovan Clingan from UConn, and I think Clingan this year, listen, there's no more Adama Sanogo in UConn. I think Clingan's destined for, of course, a big, massive role improvement. He's going to be the starting center for the UConn Huskies. He's also paired with a good point guard in Stephon Castle, who was a high-end recruit. We'll see how he plays this year as well. You'll see him later on in this mock draft. Clingan's in a really great spot here to improve his own draft stock. Now, listen, 13 minutes a game last year, averaged over 6 points, 6 rebounds. He's a massive human being, towers over 7 foot tall. He's huge. He's a big man, and that's exactly what Orlando's looking for here to complement some of their wing. Perimeter talents is another big, specifically someone who's reliable, can stay healthy. That's been a big question for Wendell Carter Jr. since Orlando traded for him. That trade was a phenomenal deal for them, no question. But I think they're just looking for stability, and I think Clingan can give them that long term. One big thing to watch for, can he stay out of foul trouble this year for UConn? My answer to that is probably yes. I think he's going to have to be a little bit more selective as a shot blocker, though. He was averaging just a ludicrous 6 block shots per 40 minutes last year. I don't see that happening again, but what I do see is him having just a fantastic year nonetheless for UConn, and I love this pick for Orlando. Pick 11, don't worry, Houston. You guys are here on the clock now. The Houston Rockets at number 11. Very interesting offseason, signing Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, drafting Amen Thompson. I can't praise Raphael Stone enough for his draft picks in recent years. I think Jabari Smith was an excellent pick. Jalen Green was an excellent pick. I would stand by those selections if I were him. And then I think when you're looking at this most recent one, Amen Thompson, I was so high on. That's an absolute A-plus home run pick, in my opinion, with his ability to read the floor, make decisions as a facilitator. His athletic profile is off the charts, unreal, maybe never even seen it before type good in the NBA at his size and length. It's just remarkable. And then when it comes to grabbing Cam Whitmore at pick 20, it's just unreal value. Unreal value. So now at 11, what does Raphael Stone here do to kind of complement his team? And I think that's the big question, and it's all about adding shooting, and that's what we're going to do here with Jacoby Walter out of Baylor, who he's just got an unreal shot profile. He's a fantastic shooter. He hasn't played with the ball in his hands a ton, specifically with who his teammates were in high school, but I think coming into college, Baylor's going to rely on him as a creator a little bit more than he's had to be in the past. Now, that might hurt his draft stock a little bit, but here at pick 11, this is roughly the range I'm thinking of him currently before the season starts. Jacoby Walter, he's a really quick trigger shot maker, and I think if you're pointing at one big flaw Houston currently has on their roster, look, they address the defense, they've got intriguing rebounding potential, they've got a lot of size, positional flexibility in terms of the length that they have, the athleticism they have. It just really comes down to how well can this team shoot the ball. I'm skeptical of that currently coming into this season, but if they grab a guy like Jacoby Walter going into this next draft, they're going to be looking really, really good going forward, and I think this team is going to be very, very dangerous long term, specifically with kind of Amen Thompson as the starting point guard long term. Pick 12, here's another pick trade that we have to discuss. The New York Knicks on the clock. This pick comes from my Dallas Mavericks. Of course, the Mavs have a top 10 protected pick here with the New York Knicks. This pick conveys this year. It did not convey last year. And the Knicks, they have a high upside chance here. They're going to take a swing on a guy who I don't think a lot of people are looking at as a potential lottery pick right now, but I think he's got the size, skill, and frame to do so and to be one, and that's Bobi Klintman for the Cairns Taipans. He's had an interesting beginning of his NBL career. Last year played at Wake Forest. I think had a pretty interesting freshman season. Didn't put up a lot of numbers. People were kind of surprised to see him declare for the NBA draft when he did. But then he actually received a lot of buzz. I think he's got a lot of skills that do translate well to the NBA. Of course, I touched on the size, the positional flexibility, but he's actually a pretty good downhill playmaker. I think he's a pretty intuitive cutter. The big question for him is the shot. That's the swing skill. Can he shoot the basketball at the NBA level? I'm still skeptical on that as well. But when it comes to development, that feels like one of the easier places to work on developing a player. Can we get his shot right? Can we build his confidence? And for the Knicks, they don't even really value shooting when it comes to draft prospect evaluation. Look at a lot of their guys. Some of them didn't shoot very well at all coming out of college. Some of them shot the ball not at all. Not even just didn't shoot it well, didn't shoot it at all. Obi Toppin's an example of that for Dayton. Obviously, he's no longer with the Knicks, but when you look at what this team drafts historically in the lottery, they have liked players who have size, athleticism. Bobby Klintman fits all of those things. And I think coming into next offseason, they're going to be looking at the power forward spot and say, we need a guy behind Julius Randle for those 10, 12, 14, 15 minutes a night. I think Bobby Klintman can fill those minutes, and I think it's a good get for them. Number 13, we have the New Orleans Pelicans here, and I'm excited about this pick for them. Look, they drafted Jordan Hawkins this most recent draft. They addressed one of their biggest team needs this offseason in shooting. It's really hard to look at the Pelicans and say this is a big flaw in their roster because there's not much there in that category of what's wrong with this team. If they stay healthy, they're elite. They're going to be a very, very, very tough team to beat. The question is, can they stay healthy? And I think one long-term question I have now, listen, I know they drafted Dyson Daniels just a couple drafts ago. I look at Dyson Daniels more as like this wing prospect and not a true point guard. I think Stephon Castle can maybe grow into being a true point guard at the NBA level. So that's who I'm having them select here. 13th overall, Stephon Castle. Out of UConn, we touched on him earlier with Donovan Clingan and how those two are going to probably look to build chemistry in the pick and roll game early. Clingan's going to be setting a ton of screens for Hurley's offense just like he did last year. And I think Castle is going to be the benefactor of that. And it's no surprise here. The Pelicans going with a UConn prospect 2 years in a row. Clearly they liked what they saw out of Jordan Hawkins last year. I'm sure that they'll have scouts in the building again watching the UConn Huskies a good amount this year. And Stephon Castle is a guy who I do think makes some sense for them in terms of his skill set, his ability to handle the ball, get to certain spots on the floor and score, his size, playmaking capabilities, and some of the upside around him. I think at 13 it's worth a shot here from the Pelicans to snag him at this pick. Pick 14 now, the Sacramento Kings, and it pained me to put them here in the lottery, I know, but I wanted to do that because if they weren't in the lottery, well, their pick would have went to Atlanta. So Kings fans, at least rejoice in that. And it was hard to find a player I loved for the Kings. You know, they don't really need a lot of guards. I feel like Keegan Murray's the forward of the future for them. It's just kind of about finding a player who fits their scheme, system, and style, and who can kind of play off of Domantas Sabonis around the middle of the floor. Well, I like Kyle Filipowski here out of Duke at 14 for the Sacramento Kings for a couple of reasons. Last year, I thought maybe he would have been a first-round selection in a very strong and deep draft, and he decided to stay in college. Obviously, the NIL deals help with that a lot. Players get paid very, very handsomely when they're playing for a school like Duke, but Filipowski is also in a big role for the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire really relies on him in a lot of different ways as an offensive hub, creating, kind of doing some of the same things to Domantas Sabonis, but I think he has a skill set that could complement Sabonis as well as a perimeter shooter. I think when you look at the Kings last year, Trey Lyles was a huge surprise for them because of his ability to shoot the ball, stretch the floor from the big man spot, and I think he offered a lot of nice things. I think Filipowski can bring that and a little bit more. He's a little bit more comfortable handling the basketball, creating, generating offense, and I think he's a really strong, physical, tough player. And that's something that, you know, you can't really write that down and really analyze that enough. That's just kind of a grit and a feel thing, and I feel like that kind of defined the Kings season last year with Domantas Sabonis playing through his thumb injury, just all the things around Sacramento. It just felt like they were a mentally tough, well-composed team. That's a huge part of Mike Brown's philosophy, of course. I think Filipowski would fit right in there in Sacramento. Pick 15, the Memphis Grizzlies here, and listen, disaster has struck for the Grizzlies in the last year or so. Think about Ja Morant, all the issues he's had off the court, but then right before the season starts this year, Steven Adams. You have, of course, the rumors And the news that he's going to miss the entire season. That is, of course, a huge loss for them as well. Averaged over 5 offensive rebounds per game. Brandon Clark coming back from an injury he suffered toward the end of last year. Just feels like they cannot catch a break. Of course, Dillon Brooks leaves. They trade for Marcus Smart. There's a lot of expectations in Memphis. And I think one big thing, they lost Tyus Jones, so they're going to go with a guard prospect here. Elmarko Jackson from Kansas. I think a lot of people look at him as a potential breakout prospect this year, a guy who's not generating a lot of lottery buzz right now, but potentially could find himself seriously in that conversation, perhaps a top 10 pick even, because he's got the handle, he's got the size, he's got kind of the downhill creation ability. Elmarko Jackson does a lot of things very, very well, and I think he just feels like a Memphis Grizzlies type of player. I hope you guys know what I mean by that. He's just got kind of that little bit of grit and determination to him, like the I won't be denied factor. And I do like that here for Memphis, specifically with some of their needs after trading Tyus Jones away in the offseason. I just think another backcourt piece could be really big for them. They ended up cutting and waiving Kennedy Chandler last season. I feel like they have a lot of front court depth. Of course, that's going to be tested this year with the Steven Adams injury. You could argue maybe they look at a big man, but I just don't really see it. Assuming health, this team probably just would prefer a backcourt option, and Elmarko Jackson feels like a good option if the Grizzlies don't trade that pick this year. Pick number 16, and one of my favorite teams to talk about in the NBA right now, the Indiana Pacers, just absolutely loaded with young talent, and it just like at this pick, I don't know what to take, to be honest. They are just phenomenally deep. And I say that in a really good way. They have a lot of players who I think are good NBA players and can play serious NBA minutes on any given night, which gives Coach Carlisle a lot of flexibility. What I have the Pacers here doing is going with a kind of high upside pick as a depth option for them early on, and a guy who I think could emerge in more ways than one, and that's Aaron Bradshaw out of Kentucky. The Kentucky Wildcats are loaded this year. There's been multiple Kentucky players drafted. It's like the G League Ignite and Kentucky Wildcat draft. There's going to be a ton of both of those, programs. You're going to see a lot of Kentucky, a lot of G League Ignite this year. Bradshaw's a big, strong physical player, really high-end recruit. In my way too early mock draft, I thought he potential top 5 pick. I've kind of waned off of that a little bit. I think his skill set, traditionally you see more outside of the lottery, kind of where Walker Kessler was drafted, where Isaiah Jackson was drafted. Pacers fans, you know what I'm talking about. Bradshaw, strong, physical, big, athletic, kind of fits the part of an NBA center. The question is, can he emerge his skill set outside of just being your traditional NBA center? And I think that's where we're going to have to see a lot of growth from him this year, and I'm excited to watch him grow and perform this year for Kentucky. Pick 17, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder here on the clock yet again. Remember, 6th overall, we have them go with Justin Edwards. So you must be saying now, okay, there's no way Oklahoma City takes another perimeter player. Well, guess what? This team loves running 5 out. Mark Daigneault likes to space and pace and get up and down the floor and drive and kick and do all of those great offensive things. And that's part of why Oklahoma City's been so good the last couple of years, even outperforming where people expect, because they just have a really good offensive system. And 17th overall, this is a really fun pick. I have them selecting Cody Williams from Colorado, the brother of Jalen Williams. Yes, the Santa Clara wing, his brother, Cody Williams from Colorado, comes into Oklahoma City at pick number 17. For Oklahoma City, it's important that they keep their players happy. We've seen in the past a young, dynamic combination of young players get broken up because of money and issues with the luxury tax. So how can OKC try and promote their young core, keep them all together for as long as possible? Well, and drafting a brother never hurts, right? Cody Williams perhaps could do a lot of nice things for Oklahoma City. I do think he's a real boomer bust player this year. I think there's going to be a lot riding on this first season with the Buffaloes for Cody Williams and kind of showcasing his talent as presumably the number 1 guy there for Colorado. He's going to be playing with the ball in his hands a decent amount. I think he's going to be given opportunities to showcase his talent on a night-in, night-out basis. I am excited for Oklahoma City. We'll see what happens with them this year in terms of their own individual in-season production. They don't really have a need for a guy like Cody Williams, but when it comes to who Sam Presti likely picks, it's about upside, talent, and guys he feels like he can develop. Cody Williams fits the bill in that regard. Pick number 18, Atlanta on the clock now. I think Atlanta's going to have a nice season. Quinn Snyder was a really great hire. I think the Hawks are in a much better situation now than they were just a year ago. And I think that with DeJounte Murray back on the books on a very friendly contract, you can't really circle guard as a need for them. So we're kind of going with this versatile playmaker. They drafted Kobe Buffkin last year, who I think can guard up and down the lineup a bit. I like his length and competitive nature defensively. We're going about offensive talent, and I'm looking specifically at a guy here in Nikola Topic from Mega Basket, who is just having a great start to his own season overseas. He's just been pouring it on in terms of scoring the basketball, multiple 20-plus point performances this season. He's just really, really talented offensively, and I think he's really grown as a playmaker within the last 12 months. From my first time really, sitting down, digging into his film to where he presently is today, I think he's grown a lot in that area as a facilitator, reading defenses, kind of being a step ahead of the defense when it comes to what passes he's throwing and his aggression, scoring the basketball. It just seems like he's making the right decision way more frequently now than he was a year ago. He was already good a year ago. I think he's really ascended, though. You'll notice 18 is probably quite a bit deal higher than what you're going to see him in a lot of other mocks. Most people are going to have him somewhere in the 20s right now. I strongly considered him in the lottery. I think Nikola Topic, there's a real chance he's a lottery level player this year. I think the Hawks get a really nice player at 18, gives them some depth behind a guy like Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is already in his 30s, and Topic could be a nice long-term developmental piece for Atlanta. Pick 19, we have the Phoenix Suns here now on the clock. Listen, this team, they did trade for Jusuf Nurkic. I know that they have Drew Eubanks. People are going to be really, really high on that. I'm a little bit less high on that, and I think this is a really great selection for them. Kel'el Ware from Indiana. Now, he was an Oregon Duck a year ago, transferred to the Hoosiers this past college offseason, and I think it was a great decision for him. Mike Woodson, a really good coach, knows how to utilize big men, put them in positions to score the basketball and succeed, and Kel'el Ware is one of the freakier athletic players when it comes to the center spot. He just knows how to move. He's really agile, can attack downhill with the ball in his hands, but he's also, I think, a really intriguing lob threat as a roller. Now, again, for the Phoenix Suns, they don't need guys handling the basketball. They need players who fit, complement Durant, Booker, and Beal. I think Ware can do that too with his ability to block shots. And if you harness his athletic traits enough, I think he can be a high productive player for you in a lot of different ways. But there's also that upside of, look, he can go get a bucket when you need him to. And sometimes it might be easy to say, oh, well, we'll rely on Durant, Booker, or Beal for that. Listen, the defenses are planning for those guys. The defenses want those guys to have to pass the basketball. So if you have a player like Kel'el Ware who can score in advantage situations and do it a little bit differently than the way DeAndre Ayton does it, which of course is why they traded him, Kel'el Ware is just a very different player, and I think he fits a little bit cleaner, but is still advantageous enough to score in those opportunities, which is why I like this pick a lot for Phoenix at pick number 19. Pick number 20, we got the Portland Trailblazers here. This pick comes from the Golden State Warriors through the Boston Celtics in the Jrue Holiday trade. And the Blazers, it's about upside here. They're going with Terrence Arsenault from Houston, a sophomore returner who I think is really set up to have a lot of opportunity this year for the Houston Cougars for a couple of reasons. First of all, Marcus Sasser, Jarris Walker, both of them went in the NBA draft, both of them first-round picks. You're looking at a lot of volume, production, touches that is leaving the Houston program, which means someone else is going to get those shots. Someone else is going to have those touches. And I think Arsenault is probably the first in line there to kind of harness and take advantage of that opportunity. He's got NBA frame, NBA size to him. I think a lot of people are already highlighting him as a potential breakout candidate this year. I definitely see that as a real possibility as well. The Blazers, earlier on, we went with a dynamic wing in Modest Buzelis. I think if the more, the merrier. If you can grab another guy who's athletic, lengthy, and can defend across the lineup, that's what you want to do. Terrence Arsenault gets the job done here for Portland in that regard. Pick number 21, we're back to the New York Knicks. Remember, they did have pick 12 from the Mavericks in this one as well. They went with Bobi Klintman with that selection. And now at 21, I mean, come on, this just feels like a New York Knicks pick. We know how much they love the ACC. We know how much they love some of those, wing contributors there. We're going with a guy here in Ryan Dunn from Virginia who just flat out knows how to defend. Turn on the tape here and Tom Thibodeau might be drooling all over the place because Ryan Dunn is a defend-first type player. Of course, no surprise playing for the Virginia Cavaliers, but he's got a lot of off-ball skills that make me think he would be a great fit next to players like Dante DiVincenzo, of course, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson as a backside cutter. He's very intuitive, and when you're playing in Virginia's offense, it's very motion style based with block remover, getting to specific spots on the floor, and kind of playing out of advantage in real small windows. Virginia historically has not been a great offense in college basketball. We all know that. We can acknowledge that. Ryan Dunn, I think, needs to find opportunities to score a bit more this year to really cement his draft status as a first-round pick. But he's got all the physicals. He's got the intangibles, I believe, to be a first-rounder. Again, this is very early on in the draft process. We know this is going to shift and change throughout the year. But Ryan Dunn's a player I would want to bet on. He's a good individual defender. I'm excited to see how the season plays out for him. We already know he looks pretty good in blue and orange. Why don't we kind of flip the colors there a little bit more orange than blue, playing for the New York Knicks this upcoming season. Pick 22, talk about a main attraction team in the NBA discourse, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. What a run they went on last season. I don't even think I've given them enough praise for that with how they started the year 2-10. Last mock draft cycle, I was talking about how the Pelicans could potentially be picking Victor Wembanyama with that Lakers selection. Fast forward 6 months or so, they were in the Western Conference Finals. That's just remarkable. Now at 22 here, which is where I'm currently projecting them to roughly have their draft pick, the Lakers, I have selecting Jared McCain out of Duke, a player who was a really highly touted prospect. I think does some things very, very well. He's kind of a combo guard, and I think that's important for the Lakers here. Looking at D'Angelo Russell, he's on a 1+1 deal with a player option. Who knows what the backcourt's going to look like long term, but as LeBron James ages, they're going to probably turn the thing over a little bit more to Austin Reeves year in, year out. And I think that's a good thing. Austin Reeves is a very talented player. He did that a lot for Oklahoma as a college prospect. I think he was really misevaluated coming out, and of course, ultimately went undrafted. The Lakers scooped him up as a high priority UDFA. And well, the rest is history. The Lakers here now have a shot to find a guy who can handle the ball, do some things with the ball in his hands, but also thrive without it. And I think that's what Jared McCain does very well. He's got a good shooting stroke. I think he's going to fit in very well in Duke. Playing off of a guy like Tyrese Proctor, I think this is a great situation for him to be in. He's going to be able to showcase all year long to teams that, hey, look, I can play with and without the ball. That's really an underrated element when it comes to the draft cycle. And I think McCain's going to sell himself big time as a first-round pick in this year's draft. Pick 23. This is probably my favorite fit of the entire draft, maybe outside of the modest Buzelis pick, second overall. And it's the Miami Heat here selecting Judah Mintz out of Syracuse. And I thought, when I'm going through these mocks, I try and think of every little avenue, every single aspect. Listen, Syracuse, known for running 2-3 zone defense. Guess which team leads the NBA in zone usage? That's right, the Miami Heat at 25% of their defensive plays last year were in zone. And I think that's really important when we're talking about Judah Mintz, who is a smart, good, intuitive defender, very active hands. He's quick, pretty solid, honestly, at the point of attack because of his ability to get up underneath guys and really go hunt the basketball. That's something that we don't talk enough about. But he's also accustomed to playing zone. He knows how to kind of rotate and get into right spots. And I think Eric Spoelstra is going to be able to weaponize that in Miami quite a bit early on. And the Miami Heat really need a point guard who can score the ball in the half court. That's been something we've been talking about for 2-3 years now. Anytime they get into the highest leverage situations, the NBA Finals against the Nuggets, the NBA Finals against the Lakers in the bubble, we've talked about, look, they could just use one more on-ball creator. Judah Mintz is that. Averaged 16 points a game as a freshman going into his sophomore year. He's a real breakout candidate, a guy who I think is going to generate a lot more buzz. He's a good athlete, can finish above the rim. He's a real heat check type shooter. Did not shoot very well last year as a freshman, shot 30% from three. Part of that is because he is a primary on-ball creator. That is a very tough role to consistently succeed in. But I think he's a player that, given the right amount of usage and fitting into the right culture, the right team in Miami, Judah Mintz could have a phenomenal career for the Miami Heat. Pick 24, look who's back again, the Oklahoma City Thunder. No surprise here to see them at this pick. Again, this pick comes from the Los Angeles Clippers, their third first-round selection in this year's draft. Boy, do they have a lot of options, and I really like who they're going with here. Dylan Mitchell out of Texas. And yes, guys, you're going to have to listen to me rave about Dylan Mitchell for a whole nother year while nobody else on the planet understands what Dylan Mitchell could be really good at. Go watch Jared Vanderbilt tape for about a half hour. Come back, watch Dylan Mitchell tape for about a half hour, and you're going to see all the similarities. Very similar frame. Both of them are left-handed. Not that that really matters, but to me, it just, you can't erase that from my memory for some reason. And they're just freakishly good athletes who know how to throw down putback dunks. I think they can leverage their size into some shot blocking opportunities. Dylan Mitchell's electric, man. When he's throwing down dunks, you hear it. And for Oklahoma City, we've addressed a lot of wings. We've given them more perimeter talent. Oklahoma City is one of the few teams in the league that could just flat out use a non-shooter. A guy who's going to sit around the dunker spot and finish lobs. And listen, Dylan Mitchell did not shoot or make a 3 last season for Texas as a freshman. We'll see. During the draft combine, he did come participate and ended up withdrawing from the draft. Mitchell was showcasing a little bit of a 3-point shot. Will we see it a lot at Texas this year? Maybe, maybe not. Did hit some mid-range shots last year. Has been flashing some mid-range shots this year in kind of training camp, early stages for Texas basketball. I think Mitchell is going to be a fun player to track this year. I was really high on him last year. I would have taken him in the first round last year if I had the right team, if I was running the right organization, that I felt like you could afford a guy like Dylan Mitchell on the floor offensively. Well, and I think Oklahoma City is just about of a perfect fit as you can get. 25, near and dear to my heart, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now they have a first round pick. Isn't that crazy how that works with this whole, everyone was freaking out about all the picks they give up for Gobert. They have a pick every other year. They've got the young core still with Anthony Edwards. They just locked up Jaden McDaniels on an extension, a very good one at that. They have Karl Anthony Towns, who is just about to enter the prime of his career. I think people were really freaking out about the Timberwolves. Look, the Timberwolves, they've made the playoffs 2 straight years. That's something they hadn't done since 2004. That's a huge, huge testament to Rudy Gobert. And if they didn't have Gobert last year with how many games Karl Anthony Towns missed, the team would have outright missed the playoffs. They did not miss the playoffs. I think that's a huge thing for them. And at pick 25, they're going to be able to add another talented player. Robert Dillingham out of Kentucky. Now, most recently, we saw him for the overtime elite Cold Hearts, where he lost in the not in the national championship game, but the overtime elite championship game to Amen and Ausar Thompson. Listen, last year everyone was saying, oh my gosh, who are the Thompson twins playing? Well, they're playing a lot of other good draft prospects. Robert Dillingham, guess what? He gets into a scrimmage against Kentucky, playing, blue on white, and he scores 40 points. Dillingham's extremely talented. He's a creative dribbler. I think a flashy player, has a flair to him that is just enjoyable to watch. I think he's a real high upside player. Right now I have him at 25. I think there's 2 ways this could go. He could completely fall out of the draft, or maybe to pick 45, 50-ish, or he could shoot up into the lottery. I really don't know which way it's going to go, which is why, again, this is the first mock really of the year. We have to see how the season plays out. The film we get, what we see from Dillingham throughout the season is going to dictate that. Right now, this is projection. And at 25, I feel good. I feel like this is about where he belongs currently. But I do, just part of me inside my head, the back of my head is telling me, look, Dillingham's going to either shoot up or shoot down. Which way is it going to go? It might be dependent on efficiency. We'll see, but I'm excited to track him this upcoming season. Pick 26, the Philadelphia 76ers here on the clock now. And given the whole James Harden situation, they're looking for kind of upside here and maybe a player they could turn into a trade asset at some point. And this is a player I'm going to be willing to bet on this season. It's Trentyn Flowers of the Adelaide 36ers. And from all accounts I have, this kid's a really good kid. I think that, he's hit a late growth spurt. He's up to about 6'9" now is what he's recently been measured at. Just a couple months ago, he was weighing about 190 pounds. He's up to about 205, 210 pounds currently. He's starting to bulk up, put on muscle, get stronger, bigger. He's getting faster, and I think he's a player that he has some guard skills to him, but he's really best as a wing. And I think with what we're going to see from Philadelphia this year, they're going to promote and prioritize the development of Tyrese Maxey as a lead guard, which means you're looking for length, size, athleticism with some ball creation skills off the wing. Trentyn Flowers really does fit the bill there with all of those categories, and I think he's a player that right now, listen, there's not enough buzz around Trentyn Flowers. I want to be the guy that says, I told you so. I was with Josh Giddey, who conveniently enough played for the Adelaide 36ers. I was the first person on YouTube to put Josh Giddey in the first round. By the end of the process, everyone was talking about him as a lottery pick. I had him as a lottery pick in November. Okay, I was super high on Josh Giddey. I'm very high on Trentyn Flowers. Don't have him quite as a lottery pick yet, but I think he's a player who he's had a high impact so far for the 36ers this year. I think there's a lot of room for him to continue to grow, climb boards right now. Most people are talking about him as a second round pick hopeful. For me, I have him firmly in the first round. I think he's a guy who could grow, continue getting better, especially as more people get their eyes on him throughout the draft process. Trentyn Flowers, he had some poor moments to start his NBL career, but now 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in, he's starting to really make strides and do a lot of things very, very well in what is a more natural off the ball, like cutting, shooting off the catch type of role, and I think he's been very productive that way. Pick 27, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers here now. At this spot, the Cavs did not finish last year as they would have liked to, but listen, this team is still really, really good. Evan Mobley, one of the best defensive players in the entire league already. Not even best young defensive players, just flat out one of the best defensive players. Darius Garland, just so dynamic, creative. I really am high on him. Donovan Mitchell is extremely talented. He's going to be an important story to watch, though. Is he content in Cleveland? That's going to be a big question. Jared Allen, are the Cavs content with him being in Cleveland? That's another thing to watch. But this is about as feel-good as it gets. The Cleveland Cavaliers, 27th overall, select Bronny James out of USC. And yes, this is a little bit of a ploy to bring the king back home. You draft his son, Bronny James, bring him back to Cleveland, Ohio. Will LeBron follow? That's one of the big questions. And listen, the Cavs with LeBron, probably good enough to make a real push for an NBA Finals, right? The one question you have, even with some of their additions, is who's the starting small forward? LeBron James would solve that pretty handedly, and it would be a really great story to see Bronny James get drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers 21 years after his father LeBron James was. I mean, it would just be remarkable to see. Now, people are going to push back and say, oh, of course you have Bronny James going in the first round because his name is Bronny. No, Bronny James is actually really good at basketball now. Of course, he's going through the health thing. In my way too early mock, I had him as a lottery pick. And I think that if he was completely healthy and, on the floor and didn't have some of that health stuff going on, I would probably still have him roughly in that area. I have him all the way down to 27 because of the health concerns, something we saw similar to Perry Jones when he came out of Baylor, what feels like well over a decade ago now, when Oklahoma City took him at, I believe, pick 28. Bronny James here, 27, this feels like a steal for me in terms of his talent. If I had to give him a comparison, it's kind of a blend of Drew Holiday and Derek White, two Celtics point guards right now. I don't think he's going to be as good as either of them. Both of them are very, 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 very good. But Bronny James is an A-plus athlete as a guard. He's going to impact the game defensively. He's really good connector when it comes to kind of making the right play, making the extra pass. He's got some of the IQ from his dad. Clearly understands the game of basketball well, and he's a deserving first-round pick as long as he's healthy. And that's a big question right now. That's why he's all the way down at 27. But we'll see how the year kind of plays out if he gets actually the capability to be on the floor this season for USC, and if he is, I'm excited to see him translate to the NBA rather quickly. 28, the Milwaukee Bucks, of course, most recently made headlines trading for Damian Lillard, and because of that, they kind of shortened their point guard rotation a little bit, lost Javon Carter in free agency, traded Drew Holiday out the door, and people are kind of questioning who is the long-term backup point guard. Well, with this pick, I think it's about upside. We saw them take an upside pick in Marjon Beauchamp, who is a pretty good wing. I think he's going to have a big role this year for the Bucks, and I think we're going to see a lot of him, which I'm very excited to see. But at 28 here, I have them going with A.J. Johnson from the NBL, playing for the Illawarra Hawks, and a player who he was more highly touted than Trentyn Flowers, who we just talked about a couple picks ago, when it was kind of coming down to his recruitment out of high school. Now, his transition to the NBL has been a little bit more up and down. I think there is a lot of room for him to grow in his game yet, but he's a good athlete. He's got a really good frame to him. I think he's an NBA level guard. It's just going to be about what type of role is he in. Is he a long-term backup point guard? Is he a low-end starter? Or is he like a depth guard? And that's there's a big variation there. And again, we have all year to figure out what he really is before my ultimate, final big board in June. That's a long ways from now. We have a lot to learn, but I'm really excited to continue watching these prospects. As you can tell, I've watched so much of them already to be able to talk for how long this video is, an hour, without pausing, without stopping. This is just all off of memory because that's how much I've watched these guys. Just have had so much fun, and honestly, AJ Johnson's a guy who I think as the NBL season goes on, he's going to get better and better as well. The Denver Nuggets at pick 29. This one excites me here. I'm going with Dillon Jones out of Weber State. Talked about him in my breakout candidates video on the channel yesterday, and I really do think Dillon Jones is an intriguing prospect. He is going into his senior season, so he's not one of those youth prospects, but when you look at what Denver most recently did with the selections of guys like Hunter Tyson, Julian Strawther, it's pretty clear and evident this team wants impact contributors, and Dillon Jones is going to be that. Another wing player. Strawther and Tyson, of course, both do that as well. Tyson, a real lights-out shooter. Strawther can shoot the ball as well a bit, but he's also got a good frame to him. Dillon Jones is a doer. That's exactly how I described him in my breakout candidates video. Averaged over 10 rebounds a game last year for Weber State. Put in about 16.5 points per night as well, and almost 4 assists. So he's just a player who competes, puts up numbers in all the right stat categories. He's got a frame to defend, and I think, maybe year one of his career goes a little up and down. If I had to liken him to a different NBA prospect from the last couple of years, it would be Wendell Moore Jr. The frame, the size, the skill set all matches pretty similarly. We saw Wendell Moore Jr. go in the top 28-ish picks or so. Here at 29, Dillon Jones goes to Denver, and I think it's a nice selection for the Nuggets. Which leads us to pick 30, the final pick here of the first round. If you guys have enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Check out the socials below as well. And here we are with Baba Miller out of Florida State. He is from Mallorca, Spain, and had a really rough freshman season. I was so excited about him about a year and a half ago when he was, really starting to gain some notoriety for his upcoming freshman season at that point at Florida State, and then he just shot the ball terribly. Did not defend very well, but he's got a lot of the traits that you could maybe sell yourself on. And for Boston, listen, they made a big trade for Jrue Holiday, sent a couple first-round picks out the door. They've made some other big moves. They made some other notable acquisitions. You think about a guy like Kristaps Porzingis. The question here is, can they afford everyone, and how does their depth look? Taking an upside pick on a guy like Baba Miller is maybe one of their few chances here to continue adding young talent to the roster to surround Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, so on and so forth. Baba Miller has all the traits that I could see, a guy like Brad Stevens being interested in. Again, this is a big what if, because if he plays like he did last year, he is not a draftable prospect. He just flat out isn't. But when you evaluate him like from a traits and raw perspective, you say there's something here. There is some upside. There is something he can grow into. He's like 6'11", really long arms. He's super thin, but he moves decently well in space. He's pretty mobile and fluid. And that's what the Celtics are going to sell themselves on. I love their Jordan Walsh pick from this most recent draft. I think coming into this year, if they can grab a guy like Baba Miller, 30th overall, they've done very, very well for themselves, and I'm just excited for their future. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to go check out the previous video. Check out my suggested video as well. Subscribe right here. Hit that subscribe button. Go join the Discord. Links in the description. Go give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks again so much, guys, for watching. Really hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe for more, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.